Hello and hello everyone. So I was planning on making this huge thing, this whole thing, but then I realized why not do it right now? So, so as you see here, I made a power slide. Well, not really a great one, but a power slide about the two events from history. One happening now, and one happened in the past 100 or more than 100 years ago. And this is basically my feelings on the whole thing and the war since it started last year. Now, when wh- when where I was when the Ukraine war started, I was working at this that job, and I only learned of it when I was watching the news on break, and it was just like, wow, is Russia going to have this war, going to conquer Ukraine, and it's going to be a Vietnam War situation? 12 months later, and this is the result. And the reason why I called it the sunk cost fallacy of Russia is that Bakhmut has basically, when you really think about it, is the worst thing that Russia should be doing at this point. And again, this is more of a rambling thing than an actual, but it's just the wars. Let's not beat around the bush. Russia's war is a complete and utter disaster. Like, no matter what you say, no matter how you feel about Ukraine or Russia, you have to be honest with yourself. Russia invasion, Russia's strategy, Russia's whole thing fighting against Ukraine is a complete and utter disaster in every metric. In strategic sense, they have fumbled it so many times that it makes the worst generals in World War I look like geniuses. I'm looking at you, Conrad von Hutzendorf. Their their logistics is a joke. Their soldiers are are even see themselves as as cannon fodder, literally. And look at this. I took this picture of Bakhmut last year when it shows these conditions, and I just can't stop but think of Verdun. Cause look at this, like you see more garbage here, but look at how so much has changed. And this is Russia's war. Like Russia has now Russia like okay, there's lots of people even now, despite everything, still think that Russia can still fight a mobile combined arms war against America or NATO. But no, this is it, man. Like this is how the war is going on. A trench filled war, and it's just war that basically more reminiscent of World War One, like War One, or more likely the Wagners. But again, the Wagners are not really that impressive, all things considered even outside of everything. Like, and I mean, the Russian war effort has become so pathetic that so pathetic that they legit that they actually like there's just so many things. And when I see this picture, I'm like, this the war can barely change depending on the situation that could it. Because think about it. Ukraine is literally on Russia's front yard. This is not a country that's like halfway around the world or a country hundreds of miles away. No. Ukraine is literally on their back door, and this is the result of it. This, and that's not to mention all the numerous disasters of Avdiivka or the slaughter, which was the Vuladar. It's like, and there's still people who try to think that Russia is smarter than it is, but this isn't. This is it. And you may say, oh, but Ukraine. But here's the thing, Ukraine, by your metrics, Ukraine should not be fighting this well. But guess what? They are. And it basically has to do with other stuff. Now, with the Battle of Verdun, Battle of Verdun in World War One was a very brutal, sad, horrific battle. It lasted from February 21st, 1916 to December 1916. It was not a good time for anyone. The thing is that Falkenhayn, supposedly, because there is some evidence to the contrary, but he basically wanted to attack Verdun because he believed that the French will, and they did, will fight to the death to make sure it never gets captured because of how important it is. And that he wanted to bleed the French dry, and destroy them. Although, in hindsight, that was kind of a stupid idea because he basically bled both him and the French out instead. And Germany thereafter Verdun would also have a lot of manpower issues that Ludendorff and Hindenburg had to deal with for the rest of the war. So good job, Falkenhayn. Although there is other evidence to suggest that he actually wanted to take Verdun, but because he couldn't, that's why he made the thing that, oh, I wanted to just beat them French right. But either way, Verdun was a complete failure, all things considered. They lost all the ground they took in Verdun, and and they and didn't really just disrupted much of the war in hindsight. All they did was basically accelerate the Battle of the Somme, which is a complete other disaster that's related to the complete disaster. That's a story for another day. But yeah, and now Bakhmut. People might be thinking that, oh, Jim, what's you attacking this place now? But sorry, but no, this Battle of Bakhmut, the whole fight for it, it started since August. They've been fighting for this one place for August, September, November, December, January, February, 7 months. For basically now 7 months now they've been fighting for it. And if you want another comparison, the Battle of Stalingrad lasted less than this. Yeah. And the Battle of Bakhmut, and you may be acting like, okay, but is the situation being bad? Yes and no. The thing is that Ukraine is, let's be real here, is way more intelligent than the Russians when it comes to tacticalness. Russia has devolved into Chinese-based human wave attacks. I mean, in the way, because even though you may say, oh no, it's not really human wave attacks, it's still good, but it still kind of is when you look at it at how the Ukrainians see them. But it kind of is because they're losing lots of soldiers to get very tiny gains. Because they would literally send 12 or so groups of small attacking forces to find any weak spots. Most of them die, but any that do find anything, they then try to go through that artillery or not. And here's the funny thing about it: it's only work in Bakhmut. Isn't that kind of weird how they actually gain any little ground in Bakhmut, but when they try this at Divka, when they try this in find this at Vuhledar and other places, it just completely fails. It's like the Russian army is trying to copy the tactics of the Wagners, but they're basically doing it even worse than the Wagners. Because the Wagners are bleeding themselves dry because we're not sure how they're going to recruit because apparently they've been forced to not be able to recruit any more prisoners, either because the prisoners are now smart and know they're going to die if they do get recruited, or by the Russian government, but they can't. Now, I will tell you this: what Ukraine also suffered losses in the Battle of Bakhmut, but in comparison to the bodies, to the mounds of bodies that Russia has lost in this one place, is not comparable. Because it's not bleed. Because it's interesting. A guy named History Legend talks about how Russia is smarter than it is, but the reason why I always compare, I'm sorry, the reason why I compare Bakhmut and the Battle of Verdun is simply that the fighting and the destruction is very reminiscent of it, or at least the way it is. You see, there were many actual French and Germans that still thought that Verdun was going to fall, especially in the early days. And the reason why is because of two forts, Fort Vaux and Fort Douaumont. This is basically Douaumont. No, Vaux. This was Fort Vaux in 1914 or 1916 before the beginning of the battle. Sorry. Now you see here, this was the fort before the battle. This was it after. Very similar to Bakhmut. They basically wrecked the whole place. And you know what's sad about the whole road thing? The Germans only got it because the French ran out of water. Could you imagine if the French were able to still have their water supply, how long it would have taken? Because Douaumont fell because of the fact that there were barely any French soldiers there, so they were able to get that one easy. But Vaux was a way harder problem. And you see how much shells, how much everything they have to use just to take this fort or try to assault it. And you could read stories of the Battle of Vaux. It was vicious and brutal. Or many other places like Cold 304, like where they literally people were getting buried from it. But here's the thing: the Germans weren't getting out there scot free. In fact, they were brutalized by it. At a, by a certain point, because of how horrific the fight in Verdun was, they legit many so officers were literally having heart attacks because of the flood. German units literally refused to even go into the front because of it. Because of it. Like many of the symptoms you see of how the Germans fell apart during the end of World War One, during the Black Days, this was actually the first signs of it in Verdun. That's how hairy they were. And then when the French counterattacked later on near November, they just completely fell apart. They lost literally all of the ground they bloodily took, and it just yeah, yeah. And then you have to wonder what was the point of all this? Because if you look at the war, at the war, nothing has changed. They changed. This is what I'm wondering about it. Let's look at the casualties. Jeez, though. The French had 75 divisions there, and the Germans used 50. And look how comparable their losses are. The French lost slightly more, but the Germans have just bled themselves bad as well. And again, as I said before, they would suffer manpower problems from since because of this. And Ludendorff basically called this battle a complete disaster. And Falkheim was sacked because of it. And it's basically due to the fact of how Douaumont, like how no, how Verdun is kind of like the whole Donbass. The reason why I call it a some cause fallacy is because the only reason I feel like the only reason I even attack it Bakhmut like this, why they even care, why the Russians even care about it, is because of political. Sure, you could say, oh, it's because of logistics, but the city is basically a land moonscape. You can't really get much from it anymore. But but it's the political because the Russian mill blogger, the Russian propaganda has been so focused on the city that if that taking it basically would try to justify in their own heads that oh this war is worth it. But took this photo before. I should have changed it, but look how much it is. I always say that, like, history repeating itself. They've lost hundreds of thousands. Just the other day, they've lost 1,000 soldiers in the battle in the whole of Ukraine. But lots are dying there. They're losing lots of artillery nowadays too. You wonder, and too. And even the Wagnerites are still saying again, we're running out of ammunition. So, ammunition. And now the mud season has come, and now they can't rely on their armor anymore. They have to rely on infantry, which is just going to be terrible for them. And also, apparently the Wagnerites are bleeding so bad that now Russian regular units like the VDV or any others are now coming in there to die along with them. And so the thing is, Bakhmut doesn't really matter if they take Bakhmut. Just like it didn't matter for the Germans if they took Vaux or Douaumont, because there was just going to be another fort they had to take, and another trench line, and another one. And this is the issue with sorry, and this is another issue with the whole war. The Russian winter offensive, when you really think about it, is a near complete failure. Other than the likelihood they could take Bakhmut, they have failed everywhere else. They have made little to no ground anywhere else other than Bakhmut. Abdika, well, they got destroyed in ambush, and Vuhledar was the biggest tank battle for the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians crushed the Russians, most times without having to see them, having to manually engage them. Just like with the Germans, they literally got Vaux and Douaumont, got make some ground, but then it bogged down. And then they realized they have to go to another fort and another trench line. And Cofield Fort constantly fought back and forth with it. And it just, what is it? Because here's the same people. Bakhmut is not even the biggest city. Literally, Kramatorsk and Soviets is supposedly their goal for taking out the Donbass. Those cities have been fortified during the time they were being endangered. And by Ukrainian witnesses and other reporters, it's been fortified to hell and back. If the Russians have so much issues foragefully fighting against Bakhmut, could you imagine the slaughter that would they even to the when they even get close to Slavyansk in Kramatorsk? And honestly, I don't even think they're going to reach that far because those two places like there's like 40 or 60 kilometers between Bakhmut and Kramatorsk. Those places, and all in the middle, there are rivers, there's other hills, other fields, and the Ukrainians have set up army defenses in the other cities near Chasiv. So even when Russia takes Bakhmut, they are going to have to deal with another defensive line that's going to kill many of their own, and it's just going to be another bloody slog to wear, and much less in the mud season. And the French, like the Ukrainians, were able to utilize the fact that they have multiple lines of defense to the point until they got counterattacked. And now my closing thoughts. I just I just wanted to make this video because I just wanted to get it all out there. Recently, there've been a lot of idiots. I'm sorry, I mean anti-war people who've been saying the most stupidest stuff. Let's be real. And it makes no sense. They all say Kiev war, we need to negotiate. But I wonder, what do you want to negotiate? Like, what are your terms? Because if it has anything to do with giving Russia what it wants, you need to shut up. You don't award imperialists, okay? You should not award imperialists unless you want something worse coming down the line. Russia has no right to be in Ukraine, has no right to do any of this. Do any of this. Full stop. Honestly, I feel like I should make a video talking of these people, but the war is a disaster, and Bakhmut most likely still is gonna still is gonna be a calling that this is the best Russia can do. Like all it can do is mindlessly rush and attack in the same place over and over again that ever again. Like they have lost, by some estimates, 50,000 soldiers, like 50,000 casualties, just taking this one place. Because remember, they've been fighting for this place for a very long time. And other sources show that from the December to now, Russia has taken 0.01% of the ground of any ground in comparison to how much Ukraine was able to gain there in Kiev and Kharkov. If that doesn't tell you that Russia is gonna lose this war, I don't know what will. Like, we're not sure how long this war will go. Either it's gonna be next year or somewhere this year, but Russia ain't gonna win this war. It's just It either going to be a bloody forever war until the Russian public finally breaks and the Russians finally give up their imperialist dreams, or the Ukrainians finally kick them out of all that land, and and Putin finally gets what he deserves. But yeah, so see you guys in the next video, and see ya.